They keep saying it's an ancient computer, but it's really just a navigational tool, I think.
Astrolabe?
Like, yeah.
An astrolabe, right?
Is it what it is? I think, yeah. I think that is what it's called.
That was brought up on Rogan at some point.
Yeah, for sure.
So I guess they had found something. I'm just assuming it was a shipwreck area, and they had, I guess, 3D scanned it to determine what was inside and realized that it was. Yeah. It could have been used for astrology or guidance or something. Or
it's from what it seems like it would make sense that it was some kind of navigational tool. So
yeah, that's pretty neat, though. I mean, see, I don't agree with the mainstream narrative that we were cavemen or that we slowly evolved over millions of years and there was no technology until basically 200 years ago. You know what I mean? Like it was basically horse and buggy until I don't believe that. Yeah, well, I mean, look at any building that was built in the last 1,000 years, and it's like their Gothic cathedrals are amazing. To me, that seems like one of the most ornate things you could get. And the claim is that was built before the power tool, before power, with a horse and buggy. And it's like, you're telling me these buildings are
with chisels, man.
I mean, the time and the effort that it would take to do that, and the accuracy too. I mean, I don't know if they've scanned them. I'm sure at some point they do a 3D laser scan with the technology we have now.
Well, I was thinking about like
I think it's hard to argue. I don't know. I mean, if you go along with the mainstream belief, but it's like some things just don't make sense because you might argue. One of the questions that gets asked is, well, why don't we make buildings like that today? And it's, well, I think you probably could, but it would cost way more. Yeah. And it would take way longer.
Well, imagine like, the amount of people that are actually doing things, meaning like innovating and creative enough to do something like that for one. There's probably a lot of them nowadays, but back then there couldn't have been. Like, well, I'm pretty sure there were a lot of retards back then, like, in comparison to like a Leonardo da Vinci. Like,
well, we don't know. We just don't know.
They're just,
but there seems
farming
to be
land and shoveling shit, and like there weren't a lot of guys building stuff to that degree. I don't imagine.
Yeah, well, I guess you would have to be just like anything else. You'd have to be trained. That would have to be your trade. Yeah, and I'm sure that if you were doing it, maybe your dad was doing it and he taught you or something. So. I don't know. Again, I wasn't there. I don't know.
Speaking of tools, I wanted to ask you what you feel like is the most important either tool or item for you as a man. Like what's something that you're like, this is something that's a necessity. And it can be a tool.
And it has to be a tool.
No, it can be any kind of item. So,
because I use a lot of tools to do work on the car, the bike. I mean, but a tool that I use every day would be an automobile. That's a big one. Yeah. In my shop, I have, of course, I have tools that work on stuff. But I mean, is a pen considered a tool? A pencil? A phone?
Yeah,
I think the phone now.
I feel like
is an essential tool.
Essential tool.
Yeah. But as a man, I mean, I think you would probably have to have a hammer. You gotta have a hammer in your shop. Do I use it that often? No,
but you can fix a lot of things with a hammer.
Well, what's funny is like I actually use my air pressure gauge.
There he is, just hammering away on her.
Just hammering away.
I walk in and I see him just going to town, hammering away on her.
Yeah, hammering away.
Jackhammering me.
So I use a bunch of stuff to maintain the motorcycle and the vehicles. So I couldn't say the most important tool because it really depends what you do. But I mean, I would have to say abstractly your your mental capacity has to be the number one tool.
Yeah.
And then your body, by extension, you hopefully are physically fit enough to use your body in the ways that you need to.
Oh yeah, as you clearly are on the screen there.
If that's if that's manly enough answer for you.
Yeah. Well, I mean, then, aside from Metamucil, I was going to say,
yeah,
a bottle, probably a journal,
a bottle opener.
Yeah, a bottle opener.
And then for those,
no, you need a keychain bottle opener.
You need a keychain bottle opener somehow. You got to crack open that cold one.
Yeah.
So these are just essential tools.
Yeah. But I was going to say, because you mentioned pen there, like probably the journal. I feel like that's probably been the most useful actual like physical tool versus like, stretching. So as an old man,
they say
I feel
the
like
pen
stretching is really important.
Than the sword. So, I mean, for probably hundreds of years there, we were using pen and paper and or the sword, etc., to get things done. And, you could argue that the journal or the process of writing is critical to
it kind of goes back to what we were just talking about with the there probably weren't a lot of people back in the day being like creatively like designing stuff, mainly because not everybody could read and write either. Like, so.
Yeah, that's hard to imagine, right? Like you're like, somebody just can't understand these words that are written on the paper. Yeah. Why are you trying to read that word?
You're some kind of fag.
Rehabilitation.
Well, I mean, because even like not even that long ago. So I would consider my dad to have been like a pretty smart guy.
Yeah.
And like we happened to go to college like similar times, and he hadn't been in school for however many years, didn't finish high school.
20 years.
So like, and
because he joined the Marine Corps when he was 17.
Yeah.
One of those.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
wow.
So he spent all his time in the military, and then when he went back to college and his 60s, 50s,
using his GI Bill, is that what he did?
Yeah. And so he got thrown in because he was he had already been pretty good at math from like construction, and like just being a person, being a man. And so when he got thrown into the math, like you take the test, the entrance exam, and so he got thrown into like the higher math class, which was algebra or some kind of algebra.
Okay.
And he like legitimately asked me. He was really confused, and he's like, "When did they start putting letters in math?" And I was like, "What are you talking about?" And he's like, "What do these letters mean?"
Oh no.
Yeah, and so I had to explain it to him, and like I landed on like, oh, it's like construction, so let's talk about it in those terms. So if you're gonna build, a truss or something like that, how would you do that? And he drew it out on a little piece of paper, and then I put letters on there, and I'm like, that's all it is. And he's like, oh, the blanks are the letters,
which is a representative character.
So he just had them as blanks, and I'm like, no, they're just you just put a letter there,
X, Y, and Z.
Yeah. So it's like it's amazing what you could do. Obviously somebody taught him how to do that stuff, right?
Yeah.
But they probably had their own system for it, and there was a time where you didn't necessarily need to know geometry to do that kind of stuff, I guess.